Let's talk a little bit about Pete. Had a busy weekend covering the president's tweets. The president did not like the fact that last week Elijah Cummings, the congressman from the great state of Maryland, that he was taking aim at the men and women of Border Patrol, insinuating that some of these migrant children apparently sitting in their own feces. The president said that's not right. That was at one of the hearings with Mr. McAleenan. And the president ultimately came around to, why are you so worried about what's going on their southern border? It's much worse in Baltimore. That's essentially what he was saying. And since then, the president has been called a racist for his comments. And he has not slowed down in the velocity of firing off these tweets.
No, he has not backed down. He said, if you're going to come after me and my policies, maybe we could take a look at your backyard where you've been a representative for multiple decades. And it continues this morning. The president tweeting just earlier this morning this. He said, Baltimore, under the leadership of Elijah Cummings, has the worst crime statistics in the nation. 25 years of all talk, no action. So tired of listening to the same old bull. Next, Reverend Al will show up to complain and protest. Nothing will get done for the people in need. Sad. He's referring to Al Sharpton, whom there's photos of him saying, hey, I'm headed to Baltimore. Which those of us who follow these types of feuds know he follows the where the heat and light is. And in this case, he's going to go to agitate.
All right, so that's what the president said in one of his tweets. And this is how the Democrats have been reacting to all this.
The president is, as he usually is, or often is, disgusting and racist.
This is beyond racism. This is the work of a serious sociopathic demagogue.
Our president has a hate agenda. He doesn't have a policy agenda.
It's important for us to call it out for what it is, which is racism. There's a pattern here. This guy is the biggest identity politician, that he engages in what's known as racial priming.
Well, Dan Bongino joined us about an hour ago, and he said there is a pattern there. After comments like that, Democrats do often make claims of racism, and here's Mr. Bongino to explain what he meant.
Whenever liberals can't defend their position, which they can't, Steve, they've run Baltimore since the 1930s. They haven't had an elected city councilman as a Republican in Baltimore in 70 years. What's their defense going to be? The Republicans did this? So what do? They scream, you're a racist. The national conversation is going to change, and a bunch of people are going to start looking and go, wait, who did destroy Baltimore? It wasn't Donald Trump. He was busy building up New York, building buildings up there, while Democrats were busy tearing down the great city of Baltimore. That's a fact.
To his point, this does afford an opportunity to have a conversation about why communities like West Baltimore have been left behind for decades and who runs them. It's Democrats and the policies of more money, more money, more money into failed systems, as opposed to empowering people through creative ideas and economic investment, which is what the president has proposed. He wants to have a policy discussion. He's willing to smack back harder than anybody, and then they always point to racism.
Yeah, well, the president's saying, I want to fix the problem down on the border. That has nothing to do with race. I just don't want criminals and drugs coming over. Has nothing to do with race, he says. And then he says, when you look at Baltimore, it has nothing to do with race. I'm talking about the rodent problem there. I'm talking about the crime there, the violence there, how we want to spend money on illegal immigrants. We want to give them insurance, but we're not taking care of our own people in Baltimore.
Well, the Baltimore Sun, the big newspaper down there, they said regarding the president and his comments about the rats in Baltimore, said, well, better to have a few rats than to be one, which is interesting because they have been reporting on the rat problem in Baltimore for a long time. Back in 2014, they had a headline that said Baltimore's rat hotspots. And then the day after the president was elected in 2016, they declared, Trump's right, declare Baltimore a disaster and rebuild it. So
you can point out, too, there's literally a documentary telling the story of Baltimore through the lens of the rat problem.
Right, and the mayor of Baltimore in September 2018 said the problem's so bad you can smell the rats.
Ew. Todd Stark was on earlier, and he said Orkin did a survey of the cities that have the most rodents, and they are one of the top 10 cities.
Number 9.
Yeah.
And it's not, as we pointed out on the program all morning long, it's not just President Trump that has said this. Of course, Bernie Sanders in 2015 talked about it. And also then President Obama talked about rioting in Baltimore after Freddie Gray's funeral. Listen to the former president.
Some of the same organizers now going back into these communities to try to clean up in the aftermath of a handful of protesters, a handful of criminals and thugs who tore up the place.
Was that a racial comment? Is he racist for calling people thugs?
I don't remember that being labeled racist.
I don't recall that either.
There's a video that we were showing earlier of a lady in the neighborhood there in Baltimore, and she's saying she had a message to Elijah Cummings saying, "You're down there checking out the border, you're complaining about that. What about our neighborhood? Please fix our neighborhood." And she said it is heartbreaking.
And it is.
Meanwhile, where we're sitting right now is New York City, and